So good afternoon, everybody. As we mentioned yesterday, we're going to have a press conference today to talk about the process by which Congressman Young's seat, our only seat in Congress, would be filled. So as we know, the U.S. Constitution, that's the U.S. Constitution, calls for an election. And as a result of that, we've had inquiries about appointments to this seat. We cannot appoint anyone to this seat under the U.S. Constitution. So there has to be an election. That election is preceded by a proclamation by the governor, myself, which will take place here later on this afternoon, tomorrow morning at the latest. We'll issue that constitution, or that proclamation. After that proclamation is issued, then the Division of Elections under the Lieutenant Governor will begin the process of laying out what this election is going to look like, timelines, signing up to run, etc. And so the majority of this press conference is actually going to be run by Lieutenant Governor and Division of Elections. Before we do that, I have a question, though, for one of the reporters, if they're online. James, are you online? James, do you know who runs the elections in the state of Alaska?
Please tell me.
You don't know? 'Cause if you don't know, you really shouldn't be reporting on this. Do you know?
I know. Do you?
You don't know. Okay, who does? Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Thank you. But yesterday there was a tweet put out by James that basically said, I run the elections, that I'm the one that's considering how this election is going to be run. I just want to make sure that the people of Alaska understand that the Division of Elections runs the elections in the state of Alaska, not the governor. So if you see any tweets or any posts by folks, including reporters, that don't understand how elections are run, we're going to straighten that out now. The Division of Elections is run by the Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor used to be the Secretary of State. After the decision to have a successor to the governor, he was renamed the Lieutenant Governor. But elections is run under the Division of Elections, not the governor. So we just want to make sure we're clear on that. And that's why this press conference will be run by the Lieutenant Governor starting at this point. But anyway, if anybody has any questions as to who runs elections in the state of Alaska, I would suggest you go to a trusted news source to get that answer. Anyway, Corey Mills is going to now speak on some of the legalities, and then the Lieutenant Governor and his staff will speak. Corey?
Thank you, Governor. Corey Mills, Deputy Attorney General for the Department of Law. So I'm just going to run through some of the constitutional as well as statutory requirements. I think a lot of this has already been out in the news, but just to go over it one more time. As the governor already stated, under the U.S. Constitution, no appointments are allowed to fill a U.S. House of Representatives seat. It is permitted for the Senate, but not for the U.S. House of Representatives. So therefore, you can't ever even enact a statute to allow an appointment of a U.S. House of Representative. Instead, our state law governs the election process to fill that seat as required by the U.S. Constitution. And those elections involve a special primary and what I call a special general election. They're run very similarly to a primary and a general. Especially under ballot measure 2. These were impacted by ballot measure 2. So, and this is all in Alaska statute 15 and 40. And you'll find the run of statutes there. So the special primary has to occur no less than 60 nor more than 90 days after the vacancy occurs. So in this case, the vacancy occurred on March 18th. And if you count out from there, June 16th is the outside date at which an election could occur. And I believe the Division of Elections and Lieutenant Governor will speak to when they recommend that this election be held based on logistics and timelines. Then you have, after the special primary, you have, this language gets a little complicated, but you have a special general election that has to occur not less than 60, and then it's the first Tuesday after the 60 days. So you basically take the special primary election, add 60 days, and whatever Tuesday falls either on that day or the next Tuesday is when the election has to occur. The special primary will be an open, nonpartisan primary, so everyone can be on the ballot. Like I said, this is all under ballot measure 2, same principles. Then you go to the special general election. You pick your top 4 from the primary. Those 4 go on the special general election, and that is a ranked choice voting ballot. And as the governor already stated, the proclamation for setting the dates actually comes from the governor. The election itself and other decisions about how it runs are done by the Division of Elections and Lieutenant Governor. I think those are the timelines I have for now.
Great, thanks, Corey. Now I have the honor to try to explain how we're going to thread this needle, knowing that we have these constraints that is state law, the 60 to 90 days, as well as the some of the federal laws that come into effect. So we'll explain these restrictions and how we're going to have 4 successful elections while under these restrictions. So, assuming there's not going to be any changes to state law by the legislature, and I have not heard of any that's going on, and that would have to happen this week in order to still do the elections. And I think that's the only reason why the governor has held off on his proclamation, just to see if they were going to. But the governor for sure will make this proclamation later this week. And as was mentioned, I'll try not to be too repetitive from what our legal folks said, but the changes to the ballot measure 2 will apply for this special primary election as well as the special general election. And the special primary election, as was mentioned, will be totally open, and the special general election will be ranked choice. Candidates will have time to declare their candidacy once the governor makes his proclamation. We hope to have all this done by April 1st. The filing will end April 1st. We need that deadline then to know who the candidates are, get the ballots printed, and then get them sent to the overseas military and others that live internationally. The federal law then says that they have to have their ballots 45 days before the election. So there's not a whole lot of time there. But what this does allow us, though, with this timing, and if we work the timing correctly, is that we can then do the special general election at the same time we do the regular primary election, which will be August 16th. This at least will save, and by the way, that will be done in a traditional manner, that election. And as was mentioned, the ballot will not only include the normal primary candidates, but it will also include the special general election, which will be the ranked choice. We can put all those on one ballot. Actually, this is going to be the first opportunity in August 16th, for people to see how this ranked choice voting is going to work. It is maybe a little bit confusing because you're going to go in and for the open primary, but then also you're going to then rank choice for the special general election. And again, the whole ranked choice voting. Gail Funumiai, who's here today, our director of elections, and with having 4 elections in 1 year, I'm very thankful that she is here with her many years of experience and has gone through this many times before. But ranked choice is new to all of us, and Gail Funumiai is trying to educate and inform people on how this process works. But obviously, we can't get to everyone. But we do have a website. Called the elections website does explain ranked choice voting in more detail. So the candidates who want to run, they'll file their declaration of candidacy, pay the $100, and again, this will have to be done by April 1st at 5 p.m. and they can go to the 5 different regional offices that we have: Nome, Matsu, Anchorage, Juneau, and Fairbanks. And they can file there in person. And we will be open the Saturday and Sunday before that April 1st deadline, which would be March 26th, March 27th. We'll also be open on a holiday. Seward's Day falls on that Monday, March 28th. And then, of course, that Tuesday through Friday, which gets you up to April 1st, it'll be normal hours for people to come and file for candidacy. But also, we will accept by mail, fax, and email, as long as we receive those by 5 o'clock on April 1st. The candidates can only declare for one office, even though we are having 2 separate elections here. And the 2 separate elections will occur on the same day, as I mentioned, the normal primary, and then the special general. They are 2 separate elections. So it is possible, because I'm anticipating this question will come up. Can a person run for both this vacant seat and for a state office? And the answer is yes. But whoever wins the election, you cannot hold 2 offices at the same time. So you'd have to give up one of them. Also, as you know, the 2021 redistricting plan is still under litigation. So we don't know districts yet entirely. The general public doesn't know their districts yet, and or where their new voting places will be. But so that's why we plan on doing the special primary election by mail, because there is going to be some confusion with the redistricting. And with the time constraints, as was mentioned, the 60 to 90 days, and then the 45 days to get it out to the folks overseas, the by mail option, which is currently in state law, to do vote by mail for special elections, that seems to work the best for at least for the primary. And as I said, then once we get to the general for this special election, we will go back to the traditional in-person way of voting. Again, not knowing if we can get adequate staff to do an in-person voting, and supply chain issues, and getting the equipment out, getting the equipment back under this short window, the vote by mail option just is pretty much the only way we can go and still have a successful primary special election. And we'll also allow people to vote at the regional offices on the day of the election, like we do now. And when we do the vote by mail, it'll be just like your absentee ballot. You will be required to get a witness signature. The Alaska Supreme Court did eliminate the witness signature requirement for the 2020 election, but that was only for that election. So we will be implementing that this election. So in summary, we got 4 elections, and in 1 year, using a totally new way of voting. We got labor challenges, which everybody does. I understand that. We got paper and supply chain challenges, which we can work around that. But again, not having a whole lot of time, it's going to be a high hurdle for Gail and her group. We'll have new districts, new voting locations for many people. We are already getting a lot of questions on Constitutional Convention and how that will work, how I can become a delegate if it passes. And unfortunately, there's still going to be COVID. So we have a lot of challenges this year, probably the toughest year that I know of anyway to have elections. But Gail and her crew are ready, prepared, and we're going to have good elections. So I think we're ready for questions, Jeff. And again, Gail Fanumii is here with me if you want to ask specifically about how they plan on making this, how they plan on pulling a rabbit out of the hat.
All right, for the reporters online, we're going to start with questions here in the room. And we're going to do this a little differently this time. We're not limiting this press conference to 1 question per reporter. We're going to keep going around the room and around the teleconference line until we get everyone's questions answered. So we're going to start here in the room in Anchorage, and we'll take our first question from Matt Hers with Anchorage Daily News.
Thanks. Wondering maybe, Gail, if you could speak a little bit to just what some of these challenges are as far as supply chain and also for labor that you're experiencing and sort of what your plans are to address those.
Certainly, thanks. Gail Fanumi from the Division of Elections. There are known paper shortages throughout the United States at this point in time. There also is a labor shortage. I think we've all seen that just in private businesses and even in state offices, people trying to recruit workers and finding adequate staff. If an in-person election requires about 2,000 plus workers, and those are your workers at the polling places as well as your board members in our 5 regional offices, it's a large number, and given the compressed time frame, the division did not feel we would be able to recruit that number of workers to be able to pull off an in-person election.
And do you have a plan for getting, I mean, do you think you will be able to get the paper that you need, or what is sort of your plan there?
I believe we are reaching out to various companies to assist us in this process, and we have not been told no, that it's not going to be possible.
And just to really quickly sort of for the big picture, like, I mean, I imagine this is just like a huge challenge for you, and I wonder if you could just like quickly describe like when you found out what had happened on Friday and just understanding what was going to be asked of like you and your division over the next several months, like how you were feeling.
Well, I met with my experienced team at the division, and we collectively, talked about this and realized it is a significant challenge, but we felt that this is the best method in which to conduct an election. Unexpected, and of course, our concerns and our prayers go out to Congressman Young and his family, and it's a very unfortunate time for them, and we have to carry on.
Okay, let's go to the teleconference line, and let's start with Becky Bohr with the Associated Press in Juneau. Becky?
Thanks. For the Lieutenant Governor or for Gail, did I hear that for the primary that you can vote by mail or in person at the regional offices? And I wanted to confirm how firm these dates are, the June 11th for the primary and August 16th for the special general election. Are those at this point written in stone, or is there still some question about whether those are going to be the actual dates?
At this point in time, the dates that have been presented are the dates that will work. The main concern is having this special primary election timely enough to get it certified so the race can appear on the August 16th primary election. So we would not be forced with doing yet another special election. And yes, there will be early voting taking place at our 5 regional offices for the 15-day period prior to Election Day, including Election Day. So people will have an opportunity to vote in person. We also do plan to ban absentee voting locations in other areas of the state that will have in-person, what's known as absentee in-person voting taking place. It may not be all 15 days, but there will be periods of time up through that 15-day period where other voting locations will be open, and those are to still be determined.
Okay, now let's go to Anthony Moore with KSRM Radio in Kenai. Anthony?
Hi, thank you. I was hoping you could go into a little bit more detail, and it doesn't matter who chooses to answer this, more detail with respect to how the redistricting is going to affect those who will be able to vote this year and where they'll be able to vote. Thanks.
Well, excuse me, the redistricting plan will affect House districts, and this election is a statewide election. So anybody who's an eligible registered voter 30 days prior to Election Day will be able to vote in this election. So the actual House district assignments do not matter for this election, so to speak. But the division is still waiting and has a lot of work to do once the final plan is approved, is approved by the courts, so the redistricting board still has work to do. We have a lot of work to reassign voters, all 580,000 plus voters, into their new House district and precincts, and get them all new voter ID cards, and also assign polling places to the new voting locations.
Okay, thanks for the question, Anthony. Now let's Andrew Kitcheman with KTOO Public Radio in Juneau.
Thank you, Jeff. I have a question for Director Fanumi, which is that you are already facing a challenge this year as far as educating the public about the new ranked choice voting system. What are your thoughts on the additional challenge now of having a ranked choice voting election 2.5 months earlier than you were already planning? And are you planning to do public education ahead of that?
Yes, it does pose a challenge. We were not prepared to do this until November. However, we have been getting word out. We have been making presentations among the state. We will be upping our efforts in that regard, and hope that also the information can be presented by the press in a factual manner to help us get the word out.
Okay, our next question is from Linda Hersey at the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Linda?
Hi, thank you so much, and I guess this question is for Gail. So having the vote by mail as the primary way of voting, has this been done before in state history? And I just want to clarify and make sure I understand the in-person, the absentee in-person voting would only take place in the 15 days prior to the election. Otherwise, it's voting by mail, and is this a first for the state? Thank you.
This would be the first statewide by-mail election. The state has done smaller by-mail elections for regional educational attendance areas and some incorporation elections, some local liquor option elections. They have been on a much smaller scale. And the window for absentee or early voting is 15 days prior to Election Day. Through Election Day.
And in this, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Linda.
Sorry, just one other question. And this is just more logistically because I'm trying to imagine it. So when there is the special general election vote and the primary vote happening the same day, would there be one ballot, or people would vote twice?
There will be one ballot that will have the vacancy office on the ballot, and then the remaining offices up for election in each House district would appear in the top 4 primary manner.
Our next question comes from James Brooks with the Anchorage Daily News. James?
Hi, thanks, Jeff. I've got multiple questions here, but I'll start off with what I have for Gail. There's some technical questions about how the vote-by-mail system will work. So, for example, would postage be paid by the state for those ballots?
The state will be paying postage this time for the reason that UOCAVA voters are uniformed and overseas citizens. The federal law requires postage to be paid for those voters, and we do not identify in our voter registration system whether or not someone is a UOCAVA voter or not. So in order to be compliant with federal law, we're going to be providing postage for all return ballot envelopes.
Do you have a follow-up, James?
The signature requirement, I understand that's reimposed. Would signature verification be used in this election?
The division has not discussed that at this time.
Do you expect it to be discussed?
Sorry, Corey Mills again. Just wanted to clarify, our statutes currently don't provide for signature verification. That would need to be in state law in order to be something that would be legally binding.
Okay, let's go to Peter Siegel. The Juneau Empire. Peter?
It sounded like James had an additional question. If he wants to ask this question, I can wait.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Peter, we'll go to you, and then, like I said, we're going to take unlimited questions, and we'll come back to James and give him another shot. So, did you have a question, Peter?
I did. Well, one of my questions is, for the education campaign, does the division, how much is that going to cost? And the other question, I perhaps for the Lieutenant Governor, is both ranked choice voting and vote by mail have been cited by people who are concerned about election security. And are you at all worried that those concerns will be heightened by combining those two things for this election? Thank you.
So the cost of a voter education plan, I don't have those figures in front of me, but we will be putting forth every effort and making sure that we're doing, a job that can get the word out across the state. And that campaign already, as you know, has been underway by producing videos about ranked choice voting and our top 4 primary video. We've sent our first statewide mailer out in January. So I do not have an actual dollar amount, but we're going to make sure that we do the best we can.
I'm going to take a second round of questions. We'll go back to Nat Hers with the Anchorage Daily News. Nat?
This question is for both the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor. My understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is that up until last year, had there been a vacancy for U.S. representative, we just would have had a special election, one election, not 2 elections. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but if I'm curious, do you guys think it is necessary and advisable to have a primary and a general and the amount of time that's associated with pulling off those 2 elections? Or do you think this is actually not the right way we should be doing this and it should just be one special election to fill the vacancy?
I'll let the individual who actually runs elections go first, okay?
I may need a little help here from our legal folks. Yes, so well, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Does it make sense to have a primary general for a special election?
Yeah, again, that's state law that we're following, that we have the primary within so many days, and then the general has to be 60 days after the primary, and the following Tuesday. So yeah, that's all in statute, and that's why we were maybe holding off a few days to see if the legislature would perhaps get rid of the primary, because there is some merit to what you're saying. Just go right to the general, and that would have certainly made Gail's life a lot easier. But if you're doing the ranked choice voting, you got to somehow find out who your top 4 are that you rank, and if you don't have that primary, then you could potentially have 20 people on the general, and that would be a nightmare. Does that sound right? Okay.
I can just clarify. So the prior law, there could have been 2 elections under the prior law. It was a special election and a special runoff. So if you didn't have someone get a majority of the votes, over 50%, you would have had to go to a second election, and actually in the same exact time frames that this requires.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
So you asked me my opinion now?
Yes.
Okay. And the opinion or the question is, do I think that we need 2 elections to determine who the successor would be to Congressman Young? You don't have to do 2 elections. You could do 1 election, but not under the current law that we have. The current law that we have, BM2, was voted in by the people, as you know. It's now law. Legislature could contemplate a change in this if they so chose, but that's up to them. So we're charged in the executive, and elections is run by the Lieutenant Governor. Just got to make that clear. So my opinion is, no, I don't think you do, but the law states that we do, so that's what apparently is going to happen.
Do you think the legislature should make a change?
I think the legislature has 21 election bills in front of us over the past 2 years. Obviously, they're going to make a decision by omission or action.
Okay, now let's take a question from Dave Ball, Alaska's news source. Dave?
All right, thanks, Jeff. Not sure who is the proper person on this, but who's ever got the answer would appreciate it. Once we do eventually get someone to replace Congressman Young, how long from the time, if it is indeed August 16th, how long before that person is in Congress, because that could leave a vacuum where our state has nobody in the U.S. House.
Mills again. So under our statutes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there would be a vacancy until the election results are certified. And then under the statutes, the person takes office on the first day that the U.S. Congress, I think it's convenes, reconvenes, whatever they do, that they're able to take that spot. But until that point, we would be without a U.S. House of Representatives representative.
May I have a follow-up on that, please? Thanks, Jeff. Governor, for you, as the governor, how concerned are you that Alaska could not have a voice for potentially a few days, maybe a couple of weeks?
I think we all should be concerned. We only have one representative, and that was seat held by Congressman Young. So now we have nobody. And, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of important issues on the table, not just for this country and this world, but for Alaska. And the sooner we get representation, the better off we're going to be. So as quickly as possible.
Thanks for the question, Dave. Now let's go back to teleconference line and Becky Bohr in Juneau. Becky?
Hi, for Gail. In terms of the by mail primary, by what date does someone have to be registered to vote to get a ballot mailed to them? And just to confirm again, will there be in person that day of election voting at various offices, or is it just going to be in a lead up?
I think if we go with the date of June 11th, I believe 30 days before that is, I don't know what it's 30 days before June 11th would be the registration cutoff. I don't have that date right in front of me. And I didn't catch your second question, Becky. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to confirm, I think I've heard two different ways, and maybe it's just the way the questions have been asked, but I just wanted to confirm if there would be any in-person voting the day of the primary, or if all of that would be in the 15 days before, if anybody would prefer to vote in person rather than with the ballot they will have mailed to their homes.
Okay, thank you. The registration cutoff will be May 13th if the election is held on June 11th. And early voting takes place up through Election Day, so there will be opportunity for people to cast a ballot in person on Election Day in our 5 regional offices and perhaps some other locations across the state to be determined.
Okay, now let's go back to Anthony Moore with KSRM. Anthony?
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, given the fact that regardless of the media that's attending both in person and via teleconference, what is being done to relieve the confusion over the 2 different elections that are going to be taking place here in the state within such a short period of time? Thanks.
Well, I think this press conference is part of the answer to that, and also the division will have information on our website about this situation and have a list of frequently asked questions. Of course, we will be providing information on our website continually and also through our social media accounts, and getting information perhaps out to voters in some kind of a mailing if the time does allow.
Okay, Andrew Kitcheman, KTOO, did you have a question?
Yes. This is a question for Director Finumiai, which is for both the special primary election and the special election. Could you walk through the timeline for when you would expect to announce preliminary or the unofficial election results, and then the dates for the certifying the election results?
So based on a June 11 election day, the last day to receive by-mail ballots would be June 21st, and we anticipate the State Review Board would then start their certification process on June 22nd. and have a tentative certification date no later than June 25th. And at that point in time, the election would be certified, and we would be able to add this race to the regular primary election ballot for August 16th.
Okay, moving on, Linda Hersey with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Linda?
Thank you so much. I don't believe, a cost question was asked earlier, but this is, I guess, being phrased a little differently. What cost overall do you anticipate for having to hold special elections? What is the additional cost?
The division is anticipating is going to be submitting a request to the legislature for funding in $2.5 million. That is an estimate that will cover the cost of mailing ballots, postage, workers, having our absentee voting locations open. So our estimated cost is $2.5 million.
And then,
go ahead, Linda.
I'm sorry, can I ask one quick follow-up, and then
Go ahead.
So this is a speculative, but I was just wondering, with the mail-only primary, if anyone wants to sort of venture a guess on how that might influence turnout in terms of, the number of responses.
I don't really have a way to predict that. We have not done this before. I think perhaps maybe people can look at the municipality of Anchorage to see what their turnout statistics have been. We don't have a way to predict turnout even if it's an in-person election. So we just hope that everyone will take advantage of this situation to cast a vote that will help fill the vacancy left by Congressman Young.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Now, James with the Anchorage Daily News. James?
Yes, thank you. Follow up and building off of what Matt had asked for the governor. My understanding is that on Sunday you would ask the legislature or leaders of the legislature whether it would be possible for them to pass a bill canceling the special primary in favor of the one election system. But legislators responded that no, it wasn't technically possible, and they were unwilling to override ballot measure 2. And I wondered if you could say whether that account is accurate and your thoughts on overriding ballot measure 2 in favor of a one election system.
So first of all, James, there was no attempt to override ballot measure 2. The question was, before the question in the discussion with the legislature was laying out what we knew in terms of compulsion from the U.S. Constitution on what had to happen as far as having an election, to what we had currently under BM2. The discussion just went to the idea that do we need to have 2 elections for this? And if we didn't, then the legislature would be the vehicle by which that would be changed. That was the nature of the conversation. So it's up to the legislature. Like I mentioned earlier, James, the legislature's had many bills before it on election reform, election integrity. This isn't something new in terms of how we do our elections. The People's Initiative that put BM2 in place is right now the law. These guys and all of us are going to follow the law. But the question was, do we need to have 2 elections? This is all new to everybody, and that was part of the discussion. But in terms of nullifying, somehow getting rid of BM2, or I forget exactly the wording you used, James, the discussion was merely trying to understand how to best do the elections within the confines of the Constitution and the laws on the books.
Okay, now let's go to Peter C. with the Juneau Empire. Peter?
Yeah, my question about concerns about election security for, both ranked choice voting and mail-in voting have been cited by people who are concerned about election security, and so I'm wondering if that's a concern to you, and if any extra measures are going to be taken to address that. Thank you.
Well, of course, this is Gail. Of course, election security is at the forefront of our minds, and we are concerned about it to ensure that we are doing everything in our power to have the elections conducted in the most secure manner possible. The division has multiple layers of checks and balances in place and processes that have been followed and proven over many, many years of conducting elections.
Let's go back to the room for a question from Nat Hers with the Anchorage Daily News.
Thanks. I guess I'd go sort of back to that question, and maybe either or both for the LG or the governor. I mean, you guys have legislation in Juneau to make some changes to the state's election system, I think, with the idea of enhancing election security that have not been passed. Without that legislation, how confident are you that these special elections and Alaska's regular elections can be held securely?
Okay, I'll take an attempt at that. Yeah, no, there's some good things being discussed down in Juneau that would improve elections overall, and make it even more secure, as you mentioned. But you know, a lot of these things, for example, signature verification machines like we have here in Anchorage, is being proposed, and we support that. But there's no way that we can, you know, buy that equipment, get people trained up on it, and have it in place before this next election. Even if the legislature was to pass it tomorrow, which we know that's probably not going to happen. You know, and I'm not too concerned by the security with the vote by mail, because this last election, and Gail can help me out, a lot of people essentially did that. They voted absentee by mail, and you know, the check and balances that we have in place, you know, to check one precinct in each district to make sure that the numbers match the machine. We didn't see any problems last elections at all, so we're not anticipating any this time either.
Okay.
So again, this is an opinion. We've had numerous bills submitted by a number of legislators because they want to make voting easier and more secure for all Alaskans. Your question is, what do we think, how do we go about ensuring or making sure? You do the best you can. You put bills in front of people to contemplate. You talk about concepts that might improve the outcomes. And we don't know what's going to happen with all kinds of electronics and technology happening all over the world. But I can tell the people of Alaska this. You increase your chance of having your vote heard if you vote. You're going to hear a lot of things throughout the next several months regarding elections, campaigns, etc. I would strongly urge the people of Alaska that despite all that stuff, there's no substitute for you going to the polls, for you voting. You may not like what's happening. You may question what's happening. I understand that. But you really want to go and vote, and you want to go and vote in numbers, and you want to do everything you can to make sure that your vote counts.
It seems like you're like I find it weird because on the one hand you're saying you're not involved in elections whatsoever. This is the LG's area, but you're also here at this press conference. It seems like you have a lot to say about
because I do the proclamation for this special election. That's why I'm here.
I guess I'm just wondering. I mean, it feels to me like just like is this an issue you're worried about, and you're worried about the way people are kind of going to be?
As an Alaskan who votes, as an Alaskan who was voted into office, should I be concerned about elections? We should all be concerned about elections, Nat. We should want to make sure that the elections work in a manner consistent with what people believe the outcome should be in terms of votes counting. And that's all I'm saying. And so I would hope I'm not the only one that wants all of our elections to go well. I would hope you would be too. I would hope that James would be too. Be concerned about how these elections go. So I think we all should be these elections to go well.
go back to the teleconference line. Becky Bohr, Associated Press. Becky?
Gail, I wanted to ask, it was mentioned earlier in the press conference about some of the issues, the logistical issues. I know in the past, during the last cycle, there was talk about challenges recruiting poll workers. Even if you won't need the numbers for the special primary, looking ahead to the other elections that you all will be conducting, are you seeing challenges that were greater even than those that you saw during the pandemic or before? You know, in other states, we're seeing election workers being villainized by people, and I'm wondering if you're seeing any new or special challenges in trying to recruit people to be those poll workers, election workers that are important to carry off an election.
So the division was very fortunate in 2020 to find an adequate pool of election workers to conduct our elections. We had a very long window of time in which to make that happen. We do have concerns. I mean, there have been in other states election officials who have been threatened, and it does instill a little bit of fear in people wanting to know if they want to do that. I'm not sure if I think I had a trouble hearing your entire question, Becky. I mean, a challenge in a compressed time frame to hire 2,400 election workers in, like, say, 30 days is very, very complicated and very difficult to attain.
Anthony Moore, KSRM.
Just a follow-up to that question and how it could possibly lead to fewer polling places given the struggle of recruiting and retaining poll workers. Thanks.
Are you referring to the August 16th primary election and how things look for that?
I was just saying in general. It was more of an in general question.
Well, we are just starting that process right now for the 2022 primary election. And we won't have idea of numbers until probably closer to May on how we're doing. We're also working on recruiting polling places based on how many precincts we think we're going to have in each House district, waiting for that plan to get finalized. It's always an evolving process, and sometimes we are looking for election workers up till the day of Election Day.
If I may just add, because I got involved in the recruitment process last time, and I know it's very difficult, and we have a total of 341 precincts. Is that right? 431 different places where we hold the elections. So, and some of these are very small villages, rural areas where you don't have a large bench of folks to call upon. So that's why we normally start the recruitment process now for August, and with this primary coming up in June. That's the reason why we opted. One of the reasons why we opted to go by mail, just because trying to get that many people in this short a time period would be extremely difficult. And the other reason too, especially in August, is a lot of people are out fishing and subsistence hunting, and certainly they will be in June as well. So so with all the challenges that we had in trying to do an in-person election in June, we just felt like the vote by mail was the best route to go. And again, this was totally our decision to go the vote by mail, and we see it work in Anchorage and other places in the state. And again, having such a large absentee ballot election the last time that went well, we are fully confident that we can make this happen.
Okay, let's go back to Fairbanks. Linda Hersey, did you have a follow-up question?
Sure. Are you aware of other states that have conducted all-mail ballot elections?
I'll have Gail answer that as well, but just from my experience as Secretary of State and going to Secretary of State meetings, there are 6 states that do their elections by mail, and if you were to talk to Secretary of State in Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, California, Utah, Colorado, they'd all say it goes great. So again, the primary, we don't tend to have as many people vote that will vote in the general, but yeah, we're confident we can make this work. Now, where we are going to be unique is that we are the only state that does the ranked choice voting for both the state and federal elections. I had a really hard time finding a Secretary of State could help me through this process, and the only one was in Maine, and they only use theirs for federal elections, not state and federal. So we'll be the only state, and so this is new territory that we're going into.
Okay. All right, let's go to James Brooks with the Anchorage Daily News. James?
Yes, clarifying question for Gail on postage. What's the difference between what's happening this year and what was happening in 2020 with postage? Is it just that this election is almost entirely by mail, and we were talking about postage for absentee ballots in 2020, or is there a difference?
Well, James, in any other election year, people have to apply to receive their absentee ballot. And on our application, we have a box for voters to indicate whether they are a uniformed overseas citizen. And so we are able to identify those voters when we mail their ballots, and they get sent the return ballot envelope that contains paid postage. They're not tracked in our voter registration system as a whole, so therefore, in order to comply with federal law and make sure that our uniformed and overseas citizens are getting their postage paid, we are going to be required to pay postage for all people who vote in this election.
Okay, so there's no way to distinguish the UOCAVA ballots for this election?
This was the manner in which the division determined was easiest. And yes, there's no other way to determine that.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Becky Bohr, Associated Press, do you have a follow-up?
Just one last clarifying question for the primary ballots. So just to be sure, so is every voter who's registered as of 30 days going to have one mailed to their address? And are there going to be drop boxes? Can they drop them off at regional offices? Can you talk about some of the different options for getting those back as well?
Every qualified voter that is registered on May 13th, will receive a ballot. Our plan is to issue our first mailing of ballots at that 45-day deadline, and then we will produce updated voter files to the ballot printer mail house to do a second round of mailing to people who are newly registered. The idea of drop boxes, that's on our table to discuss, and no decisions have been made about that. People can return their voted by mail ballot to any regional office, any city clerk's office, and they will ensure that those ballots are returned to the division safely.
Okay, we're going to go back to the room here for a minute. We have a follow-up question from Dave Laval.
Just for the
KTUU.
Thank you, Jeff. Just for the Lieutenant Governor. Sir, if you would you just, and I apologize, would you just repeat the states that you said do that mail-in voting right now, please?
It's mostly your western states, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Utah, and Colorado. And they do completely statewide vote by mail. The only other state that has a ranked choice voting is Maine, and that's only for federal races. So that's where we're totally unique.
Thanks for the question, Dave. I think we're about wrapped up. Do we have a final question from Linda at the Fairbanks News-Miner?
I'm set. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We'll turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor for closing comments.
Well, I think we pretty much covered everything, and I appreciate you allowing additional time for questions. Jeff, because Gail Fanumii, who's normally in Juneau, is here today, and so she was able to answer a lot of the questions. And she's been doing this for a while, and her staff has been doing this for a while. So I have complete confidence that we're going to pull this off, even though this is a very unusual year. But a couple things that I'd like to make sure people understand, that we are just implementing the laws. We don't create them or pass them, but the ranked choice voting was not our idea. It was done by initiative. The voters approved it, and so it's now state law, and so we're going to implement it the best we can. The vote by mail was already state law. That option, vote by mail, is an option for special elections, and we just saw and felt like in this case, with this short time period, that the vote by mail for the primary was the best way to go. And again, that was my decision, but it was state law, so we're not doing anything illegal here. So I understand both of those are going to be new concepts to folks, and we're going to do everything we can to inform and educate people about this. And the legislature has been good. They've appropriated some money already to promote and educate. And as Gail mentioned, we're going to ask for more now for the to just conduct 2 more elections that we weren't counting on. But again, with having 4 elections in a year with a new voting method, in the year where our U.S. congressman, who we all loved dearly and served 49 years, who would have guessed this was going to happen? And again, the labor challenges we talked about, the paper challenges, supply chain challenges, the new districts, that in itself is going to really throw people, I think, for a loop, because they don't know their districts. The candidates don't, and the general public yet. But we should have that, I think, by 1st of April. April 1st, okay. So, and then, the possibility of a constitutional convention if it passes. I know we're already getting calls, well, how can I be a delegate? And so we're just saying, let's see if it passes first. But there's people interested in that, and so this is going to be a very unique, unusual election. But we're ready to the best we can and prepared, and we're going to make it happen. Thank you.
Yeah, one last thing before it's closed. So we should have the proclamation done this afternoon. It'll go out this afternoon or tomorrow morning at the latest. That will begin this process. I'm going to, sometimes I sound like a broken record, and I don't necessarily think it really changes the outcome, but again, I'm going to ask the press to report as accurately as possible. I believe they have a responsibility to report accurately. I don't think it's the responsibility of the press to combine opinion pieces with what they want the people to believe as factual stories. And when that occurs, which occurred yesterday in a tweet, I'm going to call it out, especially during these times when people are trying to understand how to actually do the elections, how to actually vote in these elections. I think everybody has a responsibility. And so when I see something that I think is wrong, I'm going to call it out. And I'm going to end my part in this press conference by saying that with the passing of Congressman Young, it wasn't just the passing of an individual. It's the passing of a father. It's the passing of a husband. Passing of an individual that had many friends in the state of Alaska and across this country. And it was the passing of an era, because Congressman Young came into office many, many decades ago in a different time where America and Alaska was a different place. And the one thing I'll always remember about the congressman, amongst many, like me, he was a fellow teacher. Like me, he liked to hunt. And the other thing is he loved Alaska. And, at times he was, some would say, bombastic and theatrical. But there was always a reason for that, because he was the lone congressman for the state of Alaska. And we are far away and way up here, and oftentimes people want to forget about us, unless, of course, they want to turn us into a state park. And along with others, he fought hard for this state. And he's going to be missed by a lot of people. But as we go through this process, Again, I think we honor him by doing the best job we can with this process, the best job in reporting on this process, making sure that all Alaskans get an opportunity to vote. And I'm going to ask all Alaskans, regardless of what you hear over the next several months, you have the right, and some would say in some cases the responsibility to vote. And so in the end, this Republican form of government has less to do with us standing in front of the cameras today and really more to do with you, the voters of Alaska. So with that, thank you.